talk more about this issue. How are you?
I'm good, Liz. How are you doing?
I'm well. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
So the Archbishop weighed in on this, and he said actually that he has a major prayer that there is a compromise that is reached that involves actually relocating this mosque and Islamic Community Center somewhere else. Were you surprised that he came down on that side of this argument?
Well, I'm not sure that he did. He said he did bring up a similar situation involving a convent near Auschwitz and how that was eventually moved. But I think he gave that as a possibility, and I think his words are perhaps that is a solution here. I think, though, with the offer to mediate, I think he'd be willing to go into it with, with an open mind, obviously. I think he's written before in his blog about that there's certainly, it's legitimate to ask questions whenever any building is going to be built, but what's not acceptable is to prejudge a group or to act in a biased way or with hostility toward a religious group or against religious liberty.
Yeah, it's interesting. What he brings up on the blog actually, and which I wasn't aware of until he showed it to me, but he brings up this Staten Island convent that is proposed to be turned into an Islamic community center, and that's been some opposition into that project. And just this morning, Governor Patterson spoke about that too, and he said that he felt that this situation was different because it is so near hallowed ground. I mean, do you think that that is in fact the case? That I thought freedom of religion is freedom of religion, and it should be freedom of religion no matter where you are.
Well, I think the president spoke very well about religious liberty when he made that point. But I think what the Archbishop is trying to convey is it is certainly understandable that the feelings surrounding Ground Zero and 9/11 are still very raw in New Yorkers' mindsets, and I think that's where much of this is coming from. But certainly, as a Catholic advocacy organization, we're always concerned if religious liberty issues come into play and people are saying, well, you can't build here, you can't put a church here because we don't want you here. That becomes dangerous territory. Now, it's one thing if individuals say, look, it's insensitive, we wish that the imam who is sponsoring this community center and mosque would consider relocating. That's one thing. It's another thing to try and bring the arm of the state to bear and say, stop this, because then we're running into religious liberty issues.
Do you think actually there would be the same uproar if it wasn't a mosque and Islamic community center, but it was, for example, a synagogue? I'm Jewish, so I feel like that, or even a church. I mean, do you think that there would be even, because already there are existing institutions of faith all throughout that area, including Muslim worshiping centers?
No, of course not. I think that what I think is New Yorkers are concerned about is primarily victims. It started out with, I guess, with victims' families saying that they consider it to be an insensitive thing, and I can't speak for them. I'm not here to represent them, but certainly I don't think a church or a synagogue would have gotten any attention whatsoever.
Yeah, it is also interesting that you bring up this convent in Auschwitz. I mean, and it was a huge issue in 1993, and it took actually the Pope asking these nuns to depart, and finally they did, and after much back and forth, etc. Is this actually tantamount to that? I mean, you're talking about the Archbishop. He was very careful. I mean, might it get to some point where the religious leader says, okay, I mean, he's a huge leader in New York City, that he might come down squarely on one side or the other?
I suppose it's possible. I do not believe that's his intention. I think his intention is to, if there's any way that he, as a spiritual leader who's impartial and unbiased on the matter, can bring about a solution that everyone can live with, he would like to play that role. But he certainly, I don't think, would see it as his role to tell the Muslim community what they ought to be doing in terms of where they ought to build their house of worship.
It seems odd, though, also because isn't a tenet of Catholicism the whole loving thy neighbor, and that sort of is actually the basis of so many religions. And this argument has gotten so inflamed and so full of hate. So his effort is, in some part, to calm it down, but just it's become a conflagration.
You know, unfortunately, it's becoming a bit of it's become so politicized, and we're in a political season with an election coming up, and so I think that, unfortunately, I think both parties are guilty of sort of inflaming the issue. And there are members of both parties. I think Governor Christie of New Jersey spoke very well the other day, sort of putting blame on both sides, saying Republicans and Democrats alike shouldn't be politicizing this issue. This is really, for the families and for all New Yorkers, 9/11 is such a traumatic moment in our history, and it should rise above partisan politics. And certainly issues of the mosque shouldn't become a partisan political football.
You know, also there's another religious institution that was impacted by September 11th. It was this Greek Orthodox Church. Are you familiar with that?
Somewhat.
And this church has been trying for quite some time now, actually, to be rebuilt and has been negotiating with the state. And it's interesting to me, though, that no one, not the archbishop, not this archbishop or his predecessor, or any of these people who are now so incensed over the mosque, ever said boo about this particular problem. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think the mosque has become a media event. The mosque issue has become not just a New York event, but a national event. The president weighed in on it, and that has raised the profile so much. We would like to see the Greek Orthodox Church be able to complete its rebuilding project. And we are very sensitive to all religious faiths, because when one is impacted, all are impacted. And that's not to say that people who feel that the mosque so close to ground zero is insensitive are wrong. We understand those feelings, those very raw feelings. People who have lost loved ones, and the terrorists were acting in the name of Islam, although they're a twisted version of Islam. But still, it's understandable that some people will bristle and say, why can't they find another place to do it? But when it starts moving into just xenophobia or hatred or again, the state trying to step in to say, you may not build there, that's a whole other story.
You know, also there's this very interesting and kind of disturbing poll that Time magazine released today that found that many Americans express suspicious views of Islam, and more say that building a Muslim community center and mosque near Ground Zero in New York City would be an insult to the victims rather than tolerance. In addition, there was another poll that came out yesterday that found that a pretty high percentage, although less than 25%, of people don't know that President Obama is a Christian.
Yeah, I did see that.
Were you surprised by that?
Boy, nothing really surprises me anymore.
You do?
But
okay.
yeah,
you
it was
do
25.
work in New York politics,
25% is a pretty big number.
No, it's less than 25%.
Or rather, less than
right.
20. But well, I thought the number was it 25% that thought he was a Muslim? Was that it, or something?
I think that the issue is really that the particularly high percentage of people who are enrolled Republicans. But the problem is that there is a question regarding the president's religious affiliation.
Well, the president's always been pretty clear of his religious affiliation.
Right. He has been pretty clear. But weighing in on this particular project seems that, it looks like taking sides. I mean, isn't that the danger? Even though the Archbishop has made this very nuanced argument, don't you think that the danger is that people are going to see him as taking sides?
I think he was raising an example of where there was an issue at Auschwitz, and the issue became diffused. And I think he's looking for a way for the situation to become diffused. And I think he threw that out as one possible solution. But my understanding is his intention is, if he can be of any help in mediating it in any way, whether that be then the mosque stays there, or the mosque finds a new location to build. I think he's certainly open to any of those solutions. It's really, in the end, not his call. He's only offering his services as an impartial religious leader to help.
And do you know if anybody's taken it up on it yet?
I don't believe so at this time.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much for coming in, Dennis Poust. It's always great to see you and interesting to talk to you.